Most people spend their lives chasing complicated formulas for success, thinking the secret is hidden in some exotic strategy or rare talent. But the truth nobody wants to hear is that success, real lasting success, has very little to do with brilliance and almost everything to do with avoiding the stupidity that ruins most ordinary people. It's not the extraordinary moves that create a good life. It's the absence of disastrous ones. And that's the part of success they never taught you. Schools teach memorization. Jobs teach obedience. Society teaches comparison. But very few people ever teach you how to think. And thinking, calm, rational, disciplined thinking, is the entire basis of Charlie Munger's formula. Munger always said that the world is full of smart people who die broke because they never learned how to navigate their own impulses. People underestimate how much their own mind sabotages them. Envy, fear, overconfidence, impatience, those things destroy more futures than low income or bad luck ever could. The average person believes success comes from knowing something special. Munger believed the opposite. Success comes from knowing what to ignore, knowing which people to avoid, knowing which temptations to walk away from, knowing which habits quietly erode your chances. In other words, success comes from subtraction, not addition. The first principle of Munger's winning formula is brutally simple. Avoid stupidity long enough for the right decisions to matter. Most people try to be brilliant. That's a mistake. Brilliance is rare, volatile, unreliable. But avoiding stupidity, that's available to almost everyone. Don't overborrow. Don't overspend. Don't chase hype. Don't follow crowds. Don't partner with fools. Don't pretend you know things you don't. These rules sound boring because they are boring, and that's why people ignore them. But boredom is the foundation of a stable life. Boredom is where compounding works. Excitement is where disaster waits. The second part of the formula is character. People assume character is something you're born with, but character is built through repeated choices. Munger understood that character was the most underrated financial tool in existence. People with character don't blow up their lives for short-term pleasure. They don't lie to themselves to justify bad decisions. They don't cling to wrong ideas because of ego. They accept reality as it is, not as they wish it to be. And because they do that consistently, they avoid the traps that destroy everyone else. Success, for Munger, wasn't luck or genius. It was the predictable outcome of decent behavior repeated for decades. Another key part of the formula is simplicity. Munger believed that if a strategy couldn't be explained in a few sentences, it wasn't a strategy, it was a trap. Complexity hides risks, fees, manipulation, and delusion. Simple ideas compound. Ones implode. The average investor thinks success requires beating the market. Munger thought success required not losing to yourself. Buy good businesses. Hold them for long periods. Stay within your circle of competence. Ignore noise. Understand the incentives driving people around you. These ideas are not exotic. They're almost embarrassingly plain, but they work. And the reason they work is because most people lack the discipline to follow them. Another part of Munger's formula, and one that people rarely acknowledge, is emotional control. People imagine that the world punishes stupidity, but in reality, the world punishes emotional instability far more often. An impatient investor sells too soon or buys too fast. An envious neighbor tries to match someone else's success and gets burned. An overconfident professional bets on something they barely understand. An angry person makes a decision out of spite. All of these mistakes come from emotions, not intellect. Munger knew that the ability to remain calm while others panic, to remain rational while others brag, to remain patient while others rush, those abilities were worth more than any financial education. The formula also depends on one vital habit: lifelong learning. Munger believed ignorance was a choice. He read constantly, studied relentlessly, asked questions without shame, and he never assumed he was done learning. Most people stop learning after school because nobody forces them to continue. They get stale. They repeat mistakes. They rely on outdated beliefs. The world changes, but their mind doesn't. Munger believed that a person who keeps learning has a permanent advantage over everyone else because they adapt, evolve, and expand their circle of competence. You cannot make sound decisions if your mind is empty, outdated, or lazy. Another element, just as important, is environment. People underestimate how much their circle influences their destiny. If you surround yourself with dramatic people, you will live a dramatic life. If you surround yourself with reckless people, you will make reckless decisions. If you surround yourself with envious people, you will start comparing and competing instead of compounding. Munger always surrounded himself with rational, honest, steady individuals. Not because he needed friends who thought like him, but because he needed partners who wouldn't drag him into stupidity. Success is not just about your strengths, it's about avoiding other people's weaknesses. And finally, the formula rests on patience. Not passive patience, but disciplined patience. The willingness to wait for the right opportunities. The willingness to hold good assets even when the world screams at you to do something else. The willingness to let compounding do its quiet work. People fail because they constantly interrupt their own progress. They jump in and out, start and stop, panic and restart. Compounding doesn't reward movement, it rewards endurance. Wealth, wisdom, stability, none of those things grow quickly. They grow slowly, quietly, invisibly, and then suddenly they grow all at once. But only for the people who waited. That's the winning formula you were never taught. Avoid stupidity, build character, keep things simple, control your emotions, learn forever, protect your environment, and be patient. It's not magic, it's not glamorous, but it works. Most people go through life believing success comes from finding some breakthrough idea that others missed. They imagine there's a secret shortcut, some hidden formula, some special piece of information, some brilliant strategy only the elite know. But the truth is far simpler and far more uncomfortable. Success is mostly about how well you avoid the mistakes that everyone else is making. And the world is full of people making the same mistakes again and again, decade after decade, all while imagining they're being clever. Charlie Munger understood this better than almost anyone. His formula wasn't designed to make you extraordinary. It was designed to prevent you from becoming your own worst enemy. One of the pillars of that formula is the refusal to participate in madness. Human beings have a strange habit of believing that whatever the crowd is doing must be right. When the crowd is excited, they get excited. When the crowd is afraid, they panic. When the crowd chases a trend, they join in. And the moment the crowd gets burned, they get burned too. Munger learned early that the crowd is more often stupid than wise. The crowd follows emotion. The crowd follows envy. The crowd follows noise. But the crowd almost never follows rationality. If you want to succeed, you can't think like them. You can't behave like them. In fact, you must resist them. Another critical piece of Munger's formula is embracing reality, no matter how unpleasant it is. Most people distort the truth to protect their feelings. They lie to themselves about their habits, their spending, their risks, their judgment. They tell themselves comforting stories instead of facing uncomfortable facts. But you cannot win at life while hiding from reality. Munger always insisted on facing facts coldly and clearly. Facts don't care about how you feel. Facts don't change because you're offended. Facts don't bend to your preferences. Reality rewards the person who accepts it early and punishes the person who avoids it until it's too late. People also misunderstand how crucial self-restraint is to success. You don't need the intelligence of a genius to get ahead. You need the discipline to avoid temptations that look attractive but are destructive. Every era has its fads. Speculation, hype cycles, fashionable investments, get-rich-quick fantasies. And each one traps people who lack restraint. Munger believed that the person who can consistently say no to stupidity ends up wealthier than the person who constantly looks for brilliance. Another part of Munger's formula, rarely talked about, is learning from the mistakes of others instead of insisting on making them yourself. This is something that separates ordinary people from exceptional thinkers. Most people insist on experiencing things firsthand. They want to learn the hard way. They want to fail personally before believing a lesson. But the hard way is not noble, it's wasteful. Your life is not long enough to make every mistake personally, and some mistakes cost too much. Munger understood that history, biographies, failures, collapses, disasters, they're free lessons written by others. If you're too proud to learn from them, you'll pay the full price yourself. Another key principle in Munger's formula is staying inside your circle of competence. People love pretending they're experts. They think having an opinion is the same as having knowledge. They want to feel informed, so they convince themselves they understand things far outside their ability. That's why they make foolish decisions. They buy businesses they don't understand. They invest in industries they barely know. They follow predictions they can't evaluate. Munger's rule was painfully simple. If you don't truly understand something, how it works, why it works, and what could destroy it, then you shouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. Staying in your lane is not limiting, it's liberating. It removes noise, it removes confusion, it narrows your decisions to what you can actually analyze, and that dramatically increases your odds of success. Another overlooked piece of the formula is incentives. People rarely stop to ask, what motivates the person giving me advice? But if you ignore incentives, you will be manipulated your entire life. Munger believed that understanding human incentives was the closest thing to a cheat code in decision-making. People don't act on what is right, they act on what rewards them. Advisors paid to sell you products will sell you products. Consultants paid to sound smart will sound smart. Friends who resent you will subtly push you toward bad choices. The world is full of people whose incentives do not align with your well-being. Understanding that simple truth protects you from countless traps. Another major part of Munger's formula is thinking long-term, while the world obsesses over the short-term. Most people want immediate results. They want excitement now, rewards now, validation now. Their impatience destroys their potential. Compounding only works when you give it time. Character only matters when tested over years. Wisdom only develops when you reflect over decades. Munger built his life on the opposite approach. He thought in decades, not days. He cared about survival first, growth second. He believed that you don't need to make brilliant decisions, just avoid terrible ones over a very long horizon. And perhaps the most counterintuitive part of Munger's formula is embracing boredom. People fear boredom because they associate it with mediocrity. But Munger saw boredom as a superpower, the ability to stick with good habits, the discipline to repeat sensible actions, the patience to hold good assets, the calmness to ignore noise. Boredom is not the enemy of success. Boredom is the engine of success. The person who is willing to be bored while others chase excitement ends up far ahead in the long run. What makes Munger's formula so rare is that none of its components feel exciting. None feel glamorous. None give you the rush of feeling brilliant. But that's why they work. The world rewards people who think clearly, act rationally, learn constantly, and avoid stupidity. It punishes everyone who does the opposite. You don't need an extraordinary brain to succeed. You need extraordinary discipline in a world where everyone else is distracted. And that is the winning formula nobody taught you, because most people would rather look successful than become successful. People imagine success as a climb, a long staircase where every step moves you upward if you just keep trying hard enough. But the truth is that life doesn't work like a staircase. It works like a minefield. And most people fail not because they never found the path, but because they stepped on something explosive along the way. Charlie Munger understood that the world is rigged in favor of those who avoid the mines. His formula for success wasn't about climbing faster, it was about not blowing yourself up. And that's what they never taught you. One of the mines that destroys most adults, especially after 40 or 50, is the inability to sit still. Modern life trains people to believe that action equals progress. They're told to hustle, grind, move, chase, optimize. And that mentality works for a while. In your early life, movement produces opportunity. But as you grow older, constant movement becomes dangerous. Every new decision carries a potential downside. And eventually the downside becomes bigger than the upside. The mistake older adults make is thinking they must catch up by doing more. But Munger believed the opposite. You catch up by doing less specifically, less stupidity. At the heart of Munger's formula is the idea that your future depends more on avoiding ruin than on seeking brilliance. That runs counter to everything you see online. The world worships genius, speed, and bold decisions. But what it doesn't show you is the bodies of those who gambled and lost, the geniuses who blew up, the gamblers who never recovered, the bold decision makers who mistook delusion for courage. Munger understood that the world rewards those who simply stay in the game long enough for compounding to do its quiet work. Most people eliminate themselves before compounding ever has the chance. Another crucial part of the formula is recognizing your own psychological blind spots. Humans are not rational creatures. They're predictable creatures, predictably emotional, predictably biased, predictably self-serving. Munger believes success comes from identifying the predictable flaws in your thinking and building guardrails against them. That means acknowledging that you are prone to envy, prone to fear, prone to overconfidence, prone to impatience. The people who fail are the ones who deny these flaws. The people who succeed are the ones who accept them and build systems to protect themselves. One of the psychological traps Munger studied deeply was confirmation bias, the tendency to seek opinions that validate what you already believe. This trap ruins countless people. They convince themselves they're right, then only listen to information that agrees with them. They stop learning, stop adapting, stop challenging their assumptions. But Munger always said that the fastest way to become smarter is to destroy your own wrong ideas as quickly as possible. Success requires intellectual humility, the willingness to say, I might be wrong, and mean it. Another blind spot Munger warned about is the tendency to seek complexity when simplicity is far more profitable. People believe that complicated strategies must be superior. They think using big words and fancy graphs makes them smart. But in reality, complexity hides mistakes, while simplicity exposes them. A simple plan forces you to confront reality. A simple plan forces discipline. A simple plan can be followed consistently. Munger believed that almost everything important in life, from investing to relationships to decision-making, could be reduced to a few simple principles. And the people who mastered those principles were the ones who thrived. Another overlooked piece of the formula is the compounding effect of habits. People think compounding applies only to money, but Munger knew it applies to behavior too. Good habits compound into a good life. Bad habits compound into regret. Most people underestimate how powerful habit compounding truly is because it works slowly. It doesn't feel dramatic in the moment. A small decision, repeated for 20 years, becomes destiny. That's why Munger emphasized developing a latticework of reliable habits. Reading daily, thinking independently, spending less than you earn, choosing trustworthy people, eliminating drama, avoiding shortcuts, staying patient. None of these habits feel profound individually, but together they create a life that avoids disaster and attracts opportunity. Another major principle of the formula is respecting the role of incentives. The world is driven not by morals or intelligence, but by incentives. If you misunderstand the incentives behind people's actions, you will misread everything. Munger believed that if you could understand what motivates a person, their fears, their rewards, their desires, you could predict their behavior with surprising accuracy. And if you didn't understand their incentives, you were navigating blind. Success requires choosing environments where the incentives align with your well-being. Most people fail because they place themselves in environments where the incentives push them toward bad decisions. Another powerful part of the formula is recognizing the limits of your knowledge. People ruin themselves by pretending to understand things they don't. They offer opinions on politics, economics, markets, technology, trends, areas they've barely studied. The ego pushes them to speak confidently about topics they don't grasp. Munger built his life on the opposite approach. He avoided things he didn't understand. He said no far more often than yes. He refused to predict the unpredictable. The result, he made fewer mistakes than the average person. And success, he believed, belong not to the smartest person, but to the person who made the fewest disastrous errors. Another part of the formula, and perhaps the one least acknowledged, is the importance of choosing the right partners. Success is not a solo sport. The people you attach yourself to, friends, partners, spouses, colleagues, shape your future more than you realize. A good partner amplifies your strengths. A bad partner amplifies your weaknesses. A good partner keeps you rational. A bad partner drags you into chaos. Munger's partnership with Warren Buffett lasted half a century, not because they were identical, but because they shared values: rationality, patience, honesty, humility. Mutual trust and lack of drama gave them a compounding advantage few partnerships ever achieve. Ultimately, the winning formula Munger followed is radically simple but brutally demanding. Think clearly, act rationally, avoid stupidity, learn constantly, partner wisely, be patient, and stay in the game. Most people fail one of those steps, not because they can't do them, but because they won't. The formula was never hidden. It was simply ignored. Success comes from chasing extraordinary opportunities. But Charlie Munger believed the opposite. He believed that success comes from avoiding extraordinary mistakes. The world teaches you to pursue brilliance, innovation, ambition, and speed, but it almost never teaches you discipline, restraint, or humility, traits that matter far more once you look at life from the vantage point of age and experience. If you want a simple explanation of why so many smart people fail, it's because they chase the visible ingredients of success and ignore the invisible ones. One of the invisible ingredients Munger valued most was the power of staying rational when everyone else loses their mind. Most people believe they are rational until the world presents them with fear or euphoria. In fear, they panic. In euphoria, they gamble. And then they call bad outcomes bad luck, when the truth is they were simply following emotions instead of logic. Munger believed that emotional discipline is not just a nice trait. It is the foundation of every good decision. People ruin their lives not through lack of intelligence, but through lack of emotional control. They get angry and say something they shouldn't. They get impatient and quit too early. They get envious and chase something stupid. They get fearful and abandon something wise. If you cannot manage your emotions will manage your destiny. Another fundamental part of Munger's winning formula is selective ignorance, deliberately ignoring the thousands of distractions the world throws at you. Most people drown in noise because they believe they must pay attention to everything. News, predictions, opinions, gossip, financial forecasts, political melodrama, and the endless commentary of people who have no responsibility for your outcomes. Munger rejected nearly all of it. He believed your attention is your most valuable asset, and wasting it is like draining your future drop by drop. Success requires focusing on the few things that actually matter. Everything else is a trap. Most people fail because they allow the world to fragment their attention until they no longer know what they believe or why they believe it. Another essential part of Munger's formula is the discipline of saying, I don't know. The world pressures people into pretending they know more than they do. They feel embarrassed by uncertainty, so they fake confidence. But pretending to know is the beginning of disaster. It leads you to take risks you can't evaluate, make promises you can't fulfill, and follow trends you don't understand. Munger believed that acknowledging ignorance is a sign of strength, not weakness. It protects you from wandering into intellectual darkness. It keeps you inside your circle of competence. It prevents you from making irreversible mistakes. And most importantly, it frees you from the ego that drives so many people to financial and personal ruin. Another element of Munger's formula is avoiding people who create chaos. Chaos is contagious. If you associate with people who lie, exaggerate, cut corners, seek shortcuts, or behave recklessly, their behavior becomes part of your environment, and your environment shapes your judgment more than you realize. A single unstable friend can disrupt your peace. A dishonest partner can collapse your finances. A dramatic family member can drain the energy you need for rational decisions. Munger believed in a simple rule. Only associate with people you admire. And he meant that literally. Not people who entertain you, not people who impress you, not people who make you laugh, people you would want to become more like, because you will. Another piece of the formula is avoiding unnecessary complexity. Most people complicate life far more than needed. They think complexity signals intelligence, when in reality, it usually signals confusion. Complexity hides risk, obscures responsibility, and destroys accountability. Munger avoided investments, businesses, relationships, and systems that were too complicated to understand quickly. He believed that a simple life is not a small life, it is a powerful life. If you can see clearly, you can make better decisions. Clarity is an advantage. Confusion is a liability. And most lives collapse not under pressure, but under confusion. Another central part of the formula is recognizing that compounding only rewards the patient. The world is obsessed with speed, but speed destroys compounding. People start something, then stop it. They invest, then panic. They begin a habit, then abandon it. They learn a skill, then switch to another. This constant restarting kills momentum. Compounding needs time, years, not days. Munger understood that almost every meaningful result in life comes from consistency multiplied by time. Wealth compounds, knowledge compounds, health compounds, relationships compound, but only for individuals who do not interrupt the process every time they get bored or scared. Another important part of the formula is living below your means. It sounds simple, but it's one of the rarest disciplines. Society pressures people to upgrade constantly to display their success rather than quietly build it. But displays of success are usually the first sign that someone has abandoned the path that leads to real success. Munger believed that overspending is one of the clearest indicators of future regret. If you need a bigger lifestyle to feel important, you will always be fragile. If you keep your lifestyle simple, you will always be free. Wealth is not about how much you earn, it's about how much you keep and how you behave. Another piece of the formula is respecting the limits of planning. Munger believed in preparation, not prediction. Prediction is arrogance. I know how the future will unfold. Preparation is humility. I don't know what will happen, so I'll structure my life to withstand surprises. Most people live one surprise away from crisis because they mistake optimism for strategy. Munger believed that resilience, not optimism, is what allows you to endure and eventually prosper. And finally, the formula rests on one ultimate principle. Success belongs to the person who endures, not the person who dazzles. The world celebrates spectacular achievements, but those are rare and unpredictable. What is predictable is that people who avoid ruin think clearly, stay patient, keep learning, behave with integrity, partner wisely, and maintain emotional control, eventually rise above the chaos, not because they were extraordinary, but because they were consistent. That is the winning formula you were never taught. And the reason it works is simple. Almost nobody has the discipline to follow it.